They called us the runts of the galaxy, fragile, hairless, and laughably small. When Arthur walked into the Galactic Assembly, the elite alien empires sneered at his frail human frame. But the laughter died the moment the galaxy's most terrifying apex predator breached the doors and bowed to him. The Grand Hall of Zenith Station was an architectural marvel, designed to intimidate. Its vaulted ceilings stretched hundreds of feet into the artificial sky, and the towering seats of the Galactic Concordat were carved from the iridescent core stone of dead planets. Everything about the station was built on a scale that made humanity feel exactly as the galaxy viewed them, utterly, laughably insignificant. Arthur Pendleton, chief diplomatic envoy of the United Earth Republic, adjusted the cuffs of his tailored charcoal suit. At 5'6", Arthur was short even by human standards. In the Grand Hall, surrounded by species that averaged 8 to 10 feet in height, he looked like a child who had wandered into a boardroom of titans. Beside him stood his aide, Clara Hughes, her jaw clenched tight enough to crack a tooth. "They're doing it again, sir," Clara muttered, her eyes fixed on the central podium. "The audio feeds. They've intentionally lowered our microphone gain by 20%. They want you to have to shout." Arthur offered a mild, weathered smile. He was a man in his late 50s, his hair a distinguished silver, his posture impeccably straight. Despite the station's slightly elevated gravity, a subtle insult meant to make the humans sweat under the extra atmospheric pressure. "Let them play their games, Clara. We didn't cross 60 light years using the old Boeing Lockheed warp drives just to throw a tantrum over a microphone." At the center of the chamber, Ambassador Silas of the Altoran Ascendancy rose to speak. The Altorans were a breathtakingly arrogant species, towering at 9 feet tall with slender, luminescent blue bodies and elongated, graceful limbs. They viewed themselves as the pinnacle of evolutionary refinement. Silas looked down his non-existent nose at the human delegation's tiny booth. The translation matrix in Arthur's earpiece crackled to life, rendering Silas's musical, chiming language into crisp, aristocratic English. "And now the Assembly must address the petition of the humans," Silas announced, letting the word hang in the air like a foul odor. A ripple of low, clicking laughter echoed through the vast amphitheater. "The Earth Republic seeks full trading rights in the Orion Spur and the protection of the Concordat fleet." A rather bold request for a species that has only achieved faster-than-light travel in the last century. Arthur pressed the activation stud on his desk. He didn't shout. He spoke in a calm, measured baritone that forced the translation matrix to adapt to his cadence. "Ambassador Silas, humanity has established 5 successful colonies, eradicated planetary disease on our homeworld, and developed a thriving industrial sector. We offer exclusive rights to our agricultural yields, including our synthesized hypergrain, which your own medical journals, specifically the research of your esteemed doctor, Jonathan Hayes' equivalent High Scholar Valen note, could cure the famine on the outer rim." Silas waved a long, dismissive hand. "We are aware of your dirt-scratching capabilities, Envoy Arthur, but the Concordat is not an agricultural charity. It is a defensive and economic alliance. What military value does a species of your stature bring? You require pressurized suits just to survive standard atmospheric conditions on half our worlds. Your bone density is pitiful. You hail from a Class 9 death world, yet you look as though a stiff breeze would shatter your femur." More laughter. The Cedoan delegates, bulky aquatic creatures in containment suits, blew bubbles of amusement. The Silvari representatives whispered behind their floral appendages. "We are a resilient people," Arthur replied, his voice never wavering. "Size is not the only metric of strength, Ambassador." "Oh, but it is the only metric that matters when the dark comes," Silas sneered, leaning over his podium. "We have seen your combat footage, Arthur. Your weapons are crude kinetic throwers. Your soldiers are soft. You hide behind layers of primitive steel. If the Concordat grants you membership, we would not be gaining an ally. We would be adopting a pet, and a rather fragile one at that." Clara's hand hovered over the audio cut switch. "Arthur, give me the word and I'll remind him that our crude kinetic throwers blew a hole through a rogue asteroid last month." "Stand down, Clara," Arthur murmured privately. "Anger proves his point. We wait." "You ask for a seat at the table of gods, little human," Silas continued, playing to the crowd. "But look at you. You are a biological anomaly, a mistake of evolution. The galaxy is a dangerous place, filled with apex predators that would snap your spine for sport. You do not belong here among the elite. You belong back in your mud huts, hiding from the shadows. Arthur did not flinch. He remembered the long, bloody history of his species. He remembered the wars, the plagues, the freezing ice ages, and the burning deserts. Humanity had clawed its way to the stars with broken fingernails and a stubborn refusal to die. They did not need the permission of a glowing, oversized glow stick to exist. Ambassador Silas, Arthur said, his voice dropping an octave, ringing out clearly across the suddenly quiet hall. Do not confuse our preference for diplomacy with a lack of capability. We are small, yes, but we are dense. And we have a very, very long memory. Silas barked a harsh, musical laugh. Threats from a creature barely taller than my knee. How charming. The assembly will now vote on the dismissal of the human petition. Silas never finished his sentence. The interruption began not with a sound, but with a vibration. A deep, rhythmic thud echoed through the floorboards of Zenith Station. The grand crystal chandeliers hanging from the vaulted ceiling began to sway, chiming frantically against one another. What is the meaning of this? Silas demanded, looking toward the heavy adamantium-laced blast doors at the far end of the hall. Security! I ordered this session sealed! The heavy doors groaned. Then they bulged inward. Clara gasped, stepping closer to Arthur. Sir, those doors are rated to withstand a direct orbital strike. I know, Arthur said quietly, his eyes narrowed. With a sound like a screaming banshee, the massive metal doors were violently torn from their hinges. They flew through the air, crashing into the lower seating tiers and scattering alien delegates like bowling pins. Sirens instantly began to wail, bathing the pristine hall in flashing, apocalyptic red light. Through the dust and smoke of the breached entryway strode the nightmare of the galaxy. They were the Valerians, though human intelligence had bluntly nicknamed them the Apex. They were a nomadic, hyper-lethal warrior race that recognized no laws, no borders, and no authority other than raw strength. Standing an imposing 9 to 10 feet tall, they were a terrifying amalgamation of ursine bulk and lupine predatory grace. Coarse, midnight black fur covered their heavily muscled bodies, and their jaws were lined with serrated teeth capable of biting through reinforced hull plating. They wore scarred, asymmetrical armor forged from scavenged starships. The Galactic Concordat didn't fight the Valerians. They paid them tribute to stay away. A squad of Concordat security guards, Aegis-class elites armed with plasma rifles, rushed the breach. They opened fire, the superheated blue bolts splashing harmlessly against the Valerian's kinetic shielding. The leading Valerian didn't even slow down. With a casual, almost lazy swipe of a massive clawed hand, he sent 3 armored guards flying across the room, their armor crumpling like tin foil. Panic erupted. The elite, arrogant diplomats of the galaxy completely lost their composure. The Satoans flailed in their water tanks. The Silvari tried to burrow into the floor. Ambassador Silas shrank behind his podium, his luminescent blue skin turning a pale, terrified white. Guards! Protect the delegates! Activate the defense grids! He shrieked, all of his previous haughtiness evaporating in the face of genuine, visceral terror. The alpha of the Valerian boarding party stepped forward. He was larger than the rest, his armor decorated with the skulls of unidentified, monstrous beasts. A thick, jagged scar ran down the left side of his face, blinding one of his 4 glowing amber eyes. The translation matrix struggled to process the deep, guttural growl that emanated from his throat, rendering his name simply as Victor. Victor slammed the butt of his massive energy halberd into the floor. The shockwave cracked the stone and brought absolute silence to the screaming hall. We are bored. Victor's voice boomed through the universal translators, sounding like grinding tectonic plates. The Concordat's tribute is late, and your borders are encroaching on our hunting grounds. I have come for payment. Silas, trembling uncontrollably, peeked over his podium. We have credits. We have refined element 0. We can transfer it immediately, Warlord Victor. Please, there is no need for violence. Victor let out a terrifying, huffing laugh. He slowly paced down the central aisle, his massive weight shaking the floor with every step. He paused near the human delegation's booth, towering over them like a skyscraper made of muscle and malice. Credits are meaningless, Victor growled. I want blood. I want sport. I will take 50 of your delegates back to our fighting pits. Choose them, or I will kill everyone in this room. Silas's eyes darted around the room in absolute panic. Then his gaze landed on Arthur Pendleton. A pathetic, desperate light ignited in the Altoran's eyes. "Take the humans!" Silas screamed, pointing a trembling, elongated finger at Arthur and Clara. "Take them! They are new! They are not protected by the Concordat treaties yet. They are a weak, insignificant species. From a dirt world, take their entire delegation. Just spare the assembly." Clara drew her standard-issue kinetic sidearm, a pea-shooter, against a beast this size, but her hands were shaking. "You cowardly son of a—" she hissed at Silas. Arthur placed a gentle hand over Clara's weapon, lowering it. He did not look at Silas. He did not run. Slowly, deliberately, Arthur stepped out from behind the reinforced desk of his booth. He walked out into the open aisle, directly into the path of the towering Valerian warlord. The entire hall held its breath. The alien delegates watched in morbid fascination, fully expecting the massive apex predator to simply step on the tiny human and crush him into paste. Silas covered his eyes. Victor turned his massive, scarred head. He looked down at the tiny, silver-haired man in the charcoal suit. The Alpha leaned in close, his massive jaws parting, hot breath washing over Arthur, carrying the metallic scent of ozone and blood. Arthur looked up into the terrifying amber eyes of the beast. He didn't blink. He simply tilted his head and offered a small, familiar smile. "You're making a mess of my diplomatic summit, Victor," Arthur said, his voice conversational, completely devoid of fear. The great beast froze. The terrifying guttural growls emanating from his chest suddenly hitched. Victor leaned closer, his massive nostrils flaring as he took in Arthur's scent. Then, the impossible happened. The warlord dropped his energy halberd. The heavy weapon clattered loudly against the stone floor. Victor sank to one knee, the armor plating on his legs, groaning in protest, bringing his terrifying, scarred face down to Arthur's eye level. To the absolute horror and bewilderment of the entire galactic assembly, the bloodthirsty apex predator bowed his massive head. "Arthur," Victor rumbled, his terrifying voice softening into a sound of profound reverence. "Little brother, it has been too long." Arthur reached out a fragile, pale hand and patted the heavily armored, deadly snout of the giant alien. "It has, my friend. I see the biosynthetic implants Dr. Hayes installed are still holding up. They make me stronger than ever," Victor purred a sound like an idling starship engine. The warlord turned his massive head, fixing his remaining amber eyes on the cowering form of Ambassador Silas. The reverence vanished, replaced instantly by murderous intent. "Did this glowing insect just try to offer you as tribute, little brother?" Arthur straightened his suit jacket. "He did, Victor. He also mentioned that humanity is a fragile pet that doesn't belong in the galaxy." Victor stood up to his full, terrifying 10-foot height. He let out a roar that shattered the remaining glass in the chandeliers, turning his furious gaze upon the trembling galactic assembly. "Then the galaxy is about to learn a very painful lesson," the warlord snarled. The silence following Warlord Victor's roar was absolute, heavy enough to crush bone. Ambassador Silas collapsed backward against his podium, his luminescent blue skin flickering erratically like a dying neon sign. The grand, arrogant facade of the galactic Concordat had shattered in mere seconds, replaced by a visceral, primal dread. Silas stuttered, his elongated fingers trembling as he pointed at the human delegation. This is a trick! A holographic manipulation, a psychic projection. The Valerians do not bow. They bow to no one. Least of all, a human dirt scratcher. Victor lunged forward. His massive, cybernetically enhanced jaws snapped shut just inches from Silas's face. The kinetic barriers around the Altoran's podium shrieked and failed under the sheer physical force of the warlord's strike. "Silence! Glowing meat!" Victor snarled, his hot breath fogging the remaining glass of the delegate's booth. "You speak of things your fragile mind cannot comprehend. You measure strength by the height of your spine, but you have no spine at all." Arthur stepped forward calmly, placing a steadying hand on the beast's heavily armored forearm. "Easy, Victor. We are here to negotiate, not to paint the walls with them. At least, not yet." The warlord grunted, stepping back but keeping his remaining amber eye locked on the trembling assembly. How? Gasped a Silvari delegate, its floral crest wilting, dripping a nervous sap onto the polished floor. How does a class 9 Deathworlder command the apex? It violates every known biological hierarchy. Command? Arthur echoed, his voice carrying clearly, without the need for the artificial amplification he had been denied earlier. We do not command them. We are allies, brothers in blood. A concept the Concordat seems fundamentally incapable of grasping in your endless pursuit of superiority. Arthur adjusted his suit, looking around the devastated hall. 15 Earth, years ago, before we ever encountered your border patrols, our deep space listening outposts picked up a distress signal on the edge of the Perseus Arm. It was a chaotic, encrypted transmission. Not a call for help, but a warning to stay away. Victor raised his massive head, his voice echoing like rolling thunder. The blood rot. A bioengineered plague. A collective gasp ripped through the chamber. The blood rot was a legendary terror, a weapon of mass extinction banned by every civilized world. It didn't just kill, it liquefied the host from the inside out while keeping their pain receptors completely active. We found a Valerian dreadnought drifting dead in the void, Arthur continued, his eyes hardening as he stared directly at Silas. Your Concordat patrols found them first. We accessed your deleted sensor logs later. You saw they were infected. And instead of offering aid, your patrol ships fired upon their disabled vessel to ensure the plague and the Valerians aboard were eradicated. You left them to rot in the dark to preserve your pristine borders. Silas shrank further into his seat, his eyes darting frantically toward the exit. The rest of the assembly murmured in shock. This was a black operation, strictly hidden from the public record. When our scout ship, the UNS Magellan, approached, Warlord Victor here threatened to blow our vessel out of the sky if we docked, Arthur said, a faint, nostalgic smile touching his lips. He warned us that the plague was completely fatal to all carbon-based lifeforms. And your tiny, hairless captain ignored me, Victor rumbled, a deep sound of amusement vibrating in his chest. Captain Thomas Sterling. He rammed his airlock directly into our ruptured hull and forced his way aboard. We humans have a very different approach to impossible odds, Arthur explained to the stunned hall. We don't run from plagues. We fight them. Captain Sterling brought his chief medical officer, Dr. Jonathan Hayes, and a surgical team from the Johns Hopkins Interstellar Trauma Unit. They didn't have magical stasis fields or elegant genetic resequencers. They had broad-spectrum antivirals, heavy hazmat gear, and an absolute refusal to let someone die alone in the dark. Arthur pointed toward Victor's massive, scarred form. When the humans boarded, the blood rot had consumed half of Victor's internal organs. His original pack was dead or dying. The air was thick with toxic spores. By all your advanced galactic metrics, he was a corpse. But Dr. Hayes, along with Chief Surgeon William Bradley, refused to log his death. They set up a triage center in the middle of a slaughterhouse. Victor closed his eyes, the memory clearly still vivid. They performed a 32-hour continuous surgery in zero gravity. I watched Dr. Hayes wade through ankle-deep gore. I watched Surgeon Bradley hold my ruptured primary artery closed with his bare hands, while his suit alarms screamed about radiation exposure. They amputated the necrotizing tissue and replaced the warlord's failing biology with human-engineered cybernetics, Arthur said, his voice ringing with pride. Titanium bone weaves, synthetic blood pumps, heavy, brutal, industrial machinery. They worked until their hands bled inside their gloves, fueled by chemical stimulants and sheer, stubborn willpower. They gave me a second heart, Victor declared proudly, slamming a massive, clawed fist against his armored chest, producing a deafening, metallic clang that made the front row of delegates flinch. A human heart of iron and atomic fire. My blood is now half Earth machine. When the Concordat offered us death from the barrels of their cowardly guns, the tiny humans gave us life. They shared their water, their steel, and their blood. We swore the oath of the Iron Pack. An attack on Earth is an attack on the Valerians. Their enemies are our prey. The reality of the situation crashed over the Galactic Assembly like an icy tidal wave. They hadn't just insulted a weak, insignificant species. They had insulted the protected kin of the galaxy's most devastating military force. And worse, they realized that humanity possessed a psychological resilience that defied logic. Silas, realizing his political career and likely his life was over, made a fatal miscalculation. Panic overriding logic. His hand slammed down on a hidden emergency terminal beneath his desk. "Treason!" Silas shrieked, his voice cracking hysterically. "The humans are colluding with terrorists! Protocol Omega! Activate the automated defense grid. Purge the hall." Red emergency lights strobed violently, plunging the grand hall into a harsh, crimson nightmare. The floor grumbled as hidden hatches hissed open across the amphitheater. From the depths of Zenith Station emerged the Praetorian drones, 9 foot tall, heavily armored synthetic killbots armed with thermal disintegrators. There were dozens of them, locking their targeting lasers directly onto the Valerian boarding party and the human delegates. "Ambassador Silas!" screamed one of the Setoan delegates, thrashing in its containment tank as the water boiled slightly from the ambient heat of the weapons. "You'll kill us all! Disengage!" "It is a necessary sacrifice to eliminate the apex threat," Silas yelled, retreating behind a deployable energy shield that sprang from his podium. "The drones will not stop until the humans and their beasts are vaporized. They cannot be reasoned with." Victor bared his serrated teeth, hoisting his heavy energy halberd. Finally, a real fight. "Hold, Victor," Arthur commanded sharply. The warlord paused, glancing down at the tiny human. Arthur hadn't drawn a weapon. He hadn't even flinched. He simply turned his head toward his silent, unassuming aide. Clara Hughes cracked her neck, a terrifyingly calm smile spreading across her face. She reached into her tailored suit jacket, bypassed her kinetic sidearm, and pulled out a matte black, rectangular device that looked entirely out of place in the sleek, holographic world of the Concordat. Protocol Omega relies on a decentralized subspace quantum network, doesn't it? Clara asked aloud, typing furiously on the device's physical keyboard. Beautiful architecture, truly. Almost zero latency. But it's incredibly rigid. You aliens rely so much on elegant, flawless code that you completely forgot how to defend against a dirty, brute force street brawl. "What is she doing?" Silas demanded, watching the targeting lasers of the drones begin to flicker uncontrollably. "Fire! I command you to fire!" "My name isn't just Clara Hughes," she said, not looking up from her screen, her fingers flying across the keys in a blur. "It's Captain Clara Hughes, United Earth Cyber Warfare Division. And while you were busy lowering our microphone volume, Silas, I was busy injecting a highly aggressive, self-replicating polymorphic human algorithm into your station's mainframe. An old Earth relic we call the Cerberus worm." Clara hit the enter key with a resounding clack. It didn't outsmart the quantum computers. It flooded them with millions of lines of garbage data, causing a systemic panic and forcing an emergency reboot into safe mode. Every screen, holographic display, and lighting fixture in Zenith Station instantly went black. A heartbeat later, the emergency lights flickered back on, but they were no longer a warning red. They burned a steady, deep amber, the color of the Valerian's eyes. The Praetorian drones froze mid-step, their thermal disintegrators powered down with a whining groan. In unison, the dozens of lethal machines turned their heads away from Arthur and Victor, locking their weapon systems directly onto Ambassador Silas and his remaining security guards. Targeting parameters updated. A synthesized voice announced over the station's loudspeakers, speaking perfect Earth English. Threat assessment. Ambassador Silas. Lethal force authorized by United Earth Command. "No," Silas whispered, falling to his knees, his luminescent skin turning a sickly, pale gray. "This is impossible. Your processing power. Your technology is a century behind ours. You cannot hack a Class A Concordat matrix." "Our commercial tech is behind," Arthur corrected him, stepping calmly past the frozen kill drones. "But humanity has spent the last 5,000 years fighting each other in the mud. When it comes to warfare, subterfuge, and breaking things, we are the undisputed masters of the universe." Arthur reached up and tapped his earpiece. "Admiral Sterling, we've experienced a slight diplomatic breakdown. The Altaran Ascendancy has formally threatened Earth delegates. You are cleared to drop the veil." "Copy that." Envoy Pendleton, a gravelly, confident voice, echoed through the stolen PA system. loud enough for the entire hall to hear. Dropping the veil, we hope they like the view. Above the grand hall, the vaulted ceiling was constructed of transparent trans steel, offering a breathtaking view of the cosmos and the Concordat defense fleet stationed outside. The assembly delegates looked up, expecting to see the mighty Altoran cruisers swooping in to save them. Instead, they witnessed a terrifying magic trick. The space directly outside Zenith Station space that had appeared completely empty on all Concordat sensors began to ripple. The stars distorted like a mirage over hot asphalt. Then, the cloaking fields collapsed. A collective scream of terror erupted from the assembly. Surrounding the station were not the three tiny, primitive Earth diplomatic shuttles they had seen dock earlier. Those had been decoys. Lurking in the void were 12 United Earth dreadnoughts. They were gargantuan, ugly, and utterly terrifying. They lacked the smooth, aerodynamic curves of Concordat ships. They were brutal, blocky monoliths of matte black armor plating, bristling with hundreds of heavy kinetic railguns, nuclear torpedo tubes, and point defense batteries. The sheer gravitational displacement of their arrival actually caused Zenith Station to shudder violently. And painted on the hull of the flagship, the 3-mile-long UES Retribution was the roaring wolf bear insignia of the Valerian warlords, right next to the United Earth flag. "What are those?" Silas choked out, pointing a trembling finger at the sky. "Those," Arthur said coldly, "are the results of human engineering combined with Valerian metallurgy. You see, when Victor's people shared their reinforced alloy technology with our industrial sector, we didn't build art. We built the largest, most indestructible kinetic artillery platforms the galaxy has ever seen." Arthur finally reached Silas's podium. He looked down at the cowering 9-foot-tall alien. The physical size difference was comical, yet the power dynamic was entirely inverted. Arthur was the Titan. Silas was the insect. "You called us a mistake of evolution," Arthur said, his voice dropping into a dangerous icy register. "You called us fragile. You demanded we grovel for scraps of your protection. But humanity doesn't grovel. We endure. And when pushed, we break the things that try to break us." Victor stalked forward, coming to stand right behind Arthur's shoulder, a mountain of black fur and lethal machinery. The warlord let out a low, menacing chuckle. "Tell me, little brother," Victor rumbled, looking at Silas like a piece of raw meat. "Do we eat the blue one, or do we make him sign the treaty?" Ambassador Silas stared at the imposing, cybernetically enhanced jaws of Warlord Victor, then looked past him to the terrifying silhouette of the United Earth dreadnoughts eclipsing the stars outside the station's transparent canopy. The luminescent blue of Silas's skin had faded to a sickly, translucent gray. The Altoran's long, elegant fingers dug into the material of his ruined podium. He was a creature of high-minded politics, of sterile debates, and carefully calculated proxy wars. He was entirely unequipped to deal with the visceral, immediate reality of a massive alien predator asking a tiny human for permission to eat him. "Arthur," Silas croaked, his previously musical voice reduced to a dry, desperate rasp. "You wouldn't. The Galactic Concordat spans 10,000 worlds. If you kill me, if you fire those planetary bombardment weapons upon Zenith Station, you will plunge the entire galaxy into a war. You have 12 ships. Impressive, yes. But the Ascendancy has 1,000 fleets. You cannot possibly win a war of attrition against the established powers of the cosmos." Arthur Pendleton did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. In the deathly silence of the Grand Hall, surrounded by the towering, frozen frames of the hijacked Praetorian kill drones, his calm, measured tone was the loudest sound in the universe. "Who said anything about war, Silas?" Arthur asked, adjusting the cuffs of his charcoal suit with an air of mild aristocratic boredom. He reached out and gently pushed the barrel of Victor's massive energy halberd down a few inches. "We humans are a civilized people. We prefer peace. War is expensive, messy, and bad for business. No, we aren't going to fire a single shot today." A collective murmur of confusion and tentative relief rippled through the terraced seating of the assembly. Elder Vash, the heavily armored aquatic Sedoan delegate, activated his containment suit's external speakers. "Then this is a bluff!" Vash burbled, a mixture of water and translation static hissing through the hall. "You hold a knife to our throats to extract a favorable treaty, but you lack the economic foundation to survive a Concordat embargo. If we shut down the hyperlanes, your little Earth Republic will wither and starve in the dark within a decade. You cannot bully the galaxy into submission, tiny human. Arthur chuckled. It was a warm, almost grandfatherly sound, which made it infinitely more terrifying given the circumstances. Vash, my aquatic friend, you speak of economics as if humanity hasn't spent the last 5 centuries perfecting the art of the hostile takeover, Arthur said, turning away from Silas to address the wider hall. He gestured casually to his aide. Captain Hughes, would you be so kind as to illuminate our friends? Clara Hughes smirked. She tapped a sequence into her overridden command deck. The giant holographic projector at the center of the room, previously used to display the Concordat's shining insignia, flared back to life. Instead of a logo, it displayed a dizzyingly complex web of corporate ownership structures, logistical manifests, and banking ledgers. Let's talk about the Orion Logistical Exchange, Clara announced, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. It's the primary agricultural and raw materials provider for 70% of the Concordat's core worlds, including the Alteran Ascendancy. For the last 40 years, it has been run by a highly secretive, neutral zone syndicate known to you as the Sirius Consortium. Silas blinked, his wide eyes scanning the data. What does the consortium have to do with this? They are a deeply respected entity. They are an Earthshell corporation, Arthur stated bluntly, dropping the bombshell with the casual grace of a man remarking on the weather. The Grand Hall descended into absolute, stunned paralysis. That is impossible, Minister Yule of the Silvari gasped, her floral appendages wilting in shock. The consortium dictates the price of our planetary fertilizers. They own the transport fleets that supply our outer colonies. And they are entirely owned and operated by the United Earth Trade Coalition, Arthur continued smoothly. Specifically, orchestrated by a brilliant human named Director Angela Perez, alongside our Chief Financial Officer, Michael Sterling. While you were busy restricting our access to your precious inner circles, labeling us as fragile deathworlders, Director Perez was quietly buying up your galaxy's supply chains. Those independent merchant fleets that kept your rim worlds from starving during the Great Blight 12 years ago? Human ships, carrying Earth-synthesized grain, flown by human pilots under fabricated alien flags. Victor the Valerian warlord let out a deep, rumbling laugh that vibrated through the floorboards. And we provided the escorts, the giant beast purred. Those Concordat pirate factions you kept failing to suppress didn't stand a chance against Valerian boarding parties. You paid us heavy tribute to stay away from your core worlds, and we used your own credits to fund Earth's deep space shipyards. You bought the very guns currently aimed at your heads, Silas. You own our food supply, Silas whispered, the full gravity of the situation crushing him like a physical weight. You own the logistics. You own the debt of the Outer Rim. We even own the debt on Zenith Station, Clara chimed in cheerfully, bringing up a separate ledger signed by a human named CEO Robert Harrison of the Harrison Finch Banking Group. If we call in our loans tomorrow, the Galactic Concordat defaults. Your economies will collapse in a matter of days, your people will riot, your governments will fall, and you won't be able to afford the fuel to fly those 1,000 fleets you just threatened us with. Arthur stepped back up to Silas's podium. The human was microscopic compared to the Alteran, but in that moment, Arthur cast a shadow that swallowed the entire hall. We didn't come here today to beg for a seat at your table, Ambassador Silas, Arthur said, his voice dropping into a register of cold, unyielding iron. We came to inform you that we have bought the table. We own the chairs. And the Valerians are the bouncers guarding the door. Arthur reached inside his charcoal suit and withdrew a sleek, physical data pad, a piece of Earth tech. He placed it gently on the cracked surface of Silas's podium. This is the new treaty, Arthur explained. It grants the United Earth Republic and our Valerian allies full, unrestricted veto power on the Concordat Security Council. It eliminates all tariffs on human-produced goods, and it legally recognizes the Orion Spur as sovereign human Valerian territory. You will sign it, Silas. And then, the rest of the assembly will ratify it. Silas stared at the datapad as if it were a venomous serpent. And if I refuse? If we choose to fight you? Arthur didn't answer. He simply looked up at Victor. The apex predator stepped forward, the heavy titanium plating of his cybernetic leg grinding against the stone. Victor leaned down, his massive, scarred snout mere inches from Silas's face. He opened his jaws, revealing rows of serrated, blood-stained teeth. and let out a low, terrifying hiss. "If you refuse," Victor rumbled, his synthetic iron heart beating so loudly it could be heard across the room, "I will bite your head off, chew it in front of your delegation, and then Arthur will crash your economy. The choice is yours, little blue meat." Trembling so violently he could barely hold the stylus, Ambassador Silas reached out. He didn't look at his fellow delegates. He didn't look up at the massive dreadnoughts hovering above the glass ceiling. With a defeated, broken sob, Silas signed his biometric signature onto the human data pad. One by one, the other delegates followed suit. They queued up in dead silence, walking past the frozen Praetorian kildrones, past the towering, heavily armed Valerians, and bowed their heads to the tiny human in the charcoal suit. When the final signature was collected, Arthur tucked the datapad back into his jacket. He turned to Victor, offering that same mild, weathered smile. "Thank you, Victor. Your timing, as always, was impeccable." The giant warlord bowed his head once more, a gesture of profound, unbreakable respect. "Anything for you, little brother. Shall we return to your ship?" "Doctor, Hayes promised me a barrel of your Earth whiskey if this went well." "He did indeed," Arthur laughed, turning his back on the broken galactic assembly. "Captain Hughes, release their network. Let them keep the lights on." "Releasing network, sir," Clara said, pocketing her device. The three of them, the aging diplomat, the brilliant cyber warfare specialist, and the galaxy's most terrifying apex predator, walked side by side down the grand aisle of Zenith Station. No one spoke. No one moved to stop them. The elite of the cosmos could only watch in terrified awe as the runts of the galaxy walked out the door, having conquered the stars without firing a single shot. If this story of humanity's ultimate triumph and their unbreakable bond with the galaxy's apex predator left you breathless, then it's time to join our ranks. Smash that like button, share this epic HFY sci-fi drama with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible tales from the cosmos. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss an adventure. See you next time.